I think pretty much once they're given real opposable thumbs, then the machines will be able to do what they need to do to be a little more autonomous in that sense, right? But until
Is
that
that a good
happens,
thing?
depends on who's programming them.
Hey guys, welcome to Overcrest. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jake.
Got a fun episode for you.
That's right.
It's a follow-up to an episode that we did with Tim
From
Berisha
BBI.
from BBI.
Yep.
And when I was writing up all of the things that I wanted to talk to Tim about, a lot of it had to do with engineering.
Yeah.
And I left, as I talked to him and as we kind of started to unravel his story, I chucked all that in the trash.
Right. Because
I
he
realized
had such an interesting story.
Such an interesting story. Plus, I knew that Dmitry Orlov
Okay.
would love to talk with us.
That's
He's
awesome.
a super
and
cool
who is
dude.
Dmitry?
Dmitry is head of, oh boy, I'm going to blow
His
this.
official title?
I don't know what his official title is, but
What
his
is-
official title to me is super awesome dude who makes really cool shit at BBI.
I love it.
Yeah,
That's
so
a perfect title.
Yeah, he owns a 3D scanning company with Batim, and they have a wheel company that they do.
Wow. But Tim should probably change his official title to that.
The super cool,
Super cool, awesome dude that makes stuff.
That makes a lot of sense because it's absolutely true. And it sounds more interesting anyway. Probably not as interesting to investors. So what do you do?
Maybe.
I'm just a super cool engineering guy. What do you guys snap?
Yeah.
That probably isn't going to fly
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. Not
You don't
not
even
so
have
good.
a LinkedIn, do you?
I do.
Oh, do you?
I don't do anything with it.
I tried
but
to find you one day, I think, and I couldn't.
It's there.
Okay.
I
Do you
just
know
don't
Overcrest is on LinkedIn?
We are? Did you put us on there?
Yeah, it's me and Jeff, and we couldn't find you.
I'm on there. You just got to look a
Okay.
little bit harder. I'm there. It says like photographer for Performance VW magazine. It's so
Okay.
just absolutely ancient. Anyway, Dmitry's going to come on and I'm going to talk to him about, obviously I start digging into people and find out what they're about, who they are. And it always seems like what they actually do
Mm-hmm.
is interesting,
Mm-hmm.
but not always the most interesting part.
Right. Well, yeah, that's what makes people interesting, right? Humans.
Yeah,
It's
but what
not
you do-
they do. It's,
What you do is a big part of who you are.
you're right.
It
But
is
it's
a huge
more
part.
than just your day-to-day duties.
Yeah. Anyway,
or your title.
that's obvious.
So-
Anyways, so before we get into that interview with
Yeah.
Dmitry, what have you got for us?
Yeah, let's take a minute to talk about Petrolbox. Petrolbox is the #1 subscription box for do-it-yourself car
I
enthusiasts.
thought you were going to say #1 subscription box. I was like, wow, that is incredible.
Well, for
For-
DIY car
yeah,
enthusiasts.
absolutely.
Which is still awesome because that is what we want to focus on.
That's
Why
who
would
we
you
are.
want any other subscription box other than this one? Each month they select.
I don't have any other subscription boxes, and I've never even considered. I
I get
consider
food.
I don't do that either because it's always I'm like it always shows up, and I'm always like, like I don't really want it yet. Like it looks good. I'm like,
It's and it tastes better than you think too. A lot of times.
a lot of times it does, but it's
You don't cook anyways, so
when those show up, I do.
do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
We make a
Anyways.
thing out of it because I usually sign up for like a few 3 months or whatever, and
Yep.
then
Whatever the deal program is.
whatever the deal program is.
Well, this you can get a deal program as well. Use the code OVERCREST at checkout, and you'll get $6 off, which is better than any food box.
yes,
And what comes in the box, Chris?
because what does food turn to?
Poop.
And what does a T-shirt, some 10mm sockets turn into?
Fun surprises. You got tools, gear, magazines, supplies, and more to keep your ride smooth, as they say on their website.
Nothing in your Petro box will ever go to shit. That's all I can say.
I
That's-
would hope not.
yeah.
I
So
would
head over to
certainly hope
petrobox.com,
not.
enter code Overcrest to get some discounts. Support them. It'll be awesome. Just to reach out to some of our sponsors or partners that support us.
Yes.
and support you by doing cool stuff.
Have you noticed, Chris? A lot of podcasts sell mattresses and I don't know. I haven't even listened to a lot of podcasts lately, but yeah, like I don't know why it's always mattresses, Casper,
It's direct to
etc.
consumer, a lot of direct to consumer
Yes.
stuff.
What we do is we focus on and hand select the partners that we actually like the product that we know you guys will too.
So if you like us, when
Which
you have a product that
hopefully
we would
you do.
like,
Oh yeah, that too. No,
Hit
I
us
was
up.
talking about our listeners though.
we'll peddle your shit.
That's not at all what the point is, Chris.
Oh, I thought that's what you were getting at.
No, we hand select what we actually like and what fits what we think our listeners will like.
Yes.
So we believe in this stuff.
Yeah,
It's
but
not
also
poop.
we'll peddle your shit
okay
if we
good.
like it.
Yes, sure, but we have to like
if we
it.
like it.
Yes,
So
exactly.
hit us up. We'd be happy to work
It's
with
not
you.
at all where I was going with that, but sure.
But it works.
MyPetrolbox.com. Check them out.
All right, Jake, you go home. I'm going to talk to Dmitry.
That sounds good.
All right. Dude, Dmitry, thanks so much for coming to hang out.
Thanks for having me, man.
And I thought
Gonna
this
be
would
pretty
be a great follow up to hanging out with Batim, talk to you as well, get some other thoughts, and just kind of hear a little bit about your story.
fun. My story, yeah. I mean, I get to hang out with Batim too. It was fun hearing his podcast on your channel, and
Did
I've
you
heard
find
the
out anything you
stories
didn't know?
before. No, not really. um, Heard most of it before. I think he gets better at telling the stories, and it becomes more concise and cleaner every time, which is nice. But it's yeah, he's got quite the life. Part of the things that kind of made me like him a lot, and kind of interested in what he's done and how he's done it, and stood apart in the industry as a whole. So it's fun being around him, and we have a good relationship between the two of us because it's he's got a mindset and I have a different mindset, and kind of I think they go hand in hand more and often than they don't. So it's been kind of allowed some of the crazier things to come to fruition because of that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to work with another version of yourself, because that's definitely not going to get anything done, and nothing interesting is going to happen.
No,
Having a
no.
yes man as in yourself isn't gonna do anything. So I asked Batem. I said, "Hey man, what should I talk to Dmitry about?" And he gave me like this huge list of all this stuff, but I think we should talk about roulette first. I think
Yeah,
is
yeah. As in to the moment you sit down to just nod, stand up, and walk away.
yeah, that's exactly it. That's
Yeah,
exactly what we should do. This is speaking to Dmitry and I going out after SEMA, and well, mainly me being an idiot and throwing a bunch of money at roulette and losing every single
hey
time.
man, you got me inspired, and I was all about it. And then for a minute, it looked promising until it didn't.
Yeah, like
Then I figured out how the house always wins.
yeah, they do. They always have an angle. That's absolutely true. So I kind of started to learn a little bit about your history, and from your name, you can almost infer that you're not born here.
No,
Just or your parents weren't born here, or whatever the case may be. Where are you from?
I am from Russia. I was born in Moscow.
Okay, and you were born on a very special day, I hear.
Yeah, very special day. Came in with a bang, as you could say. Not a good one at that, but yeah, it was April 26th. It was Chernobyl in '86. So I think from what my mom has told me, she was in a hospital in Moscow, and then at some point, I guess people started closing windows, but no one knew anything for a couple of days. But
Right.
nobody knew what the threat was going to be, how far it was going to go, where it was going to go. But that was that.
How long were you in Russia as a child?
Um, I wouldn't say that long on and off. I mean, my father's a journalist and he traveled a lot. So my first 4 weeks of my life was in Moscow, and I think shortly thereafter we went back to India, where my parents were living at the time. And the first 3 or 4 years of my life was in India, and then we bounced back to Russia, and then traveled here and there, and then ended up moving to the U.S. in 1995.
So where did your kind of your formative years happen then, generally, if you had to?
Probably the U.S.
Okay.
I'd say because like if you think back to your childhood, like before the tens and twelves, you're kind of like just a kid, right? Kind of anywhere, and I had some. I remember, Russia pretty well, but I think the real experiences came in the U.S. Just at least the ones I can better remember as well. They were like I was more aware of experiences as they were happening to me, right? And then I guess any kid is like that, right? And they were more impactful at that point for me.
Yeah, I think once you hit like 10, 12, before that, you're on like
It's
almost
a
like a
generic, an intro level operating system for a child, right? Like,
yeah, boot program. It's like a marble going down a track. You don't really have control over where you're going. You're not really autonomous
No,
in any way,
no.
right? You're just kind of going along with emotions. Once you hit like 10, 12 years old, and I can see it in my daughter, she's turning 10, and you can see her starting to like have wants and desires that aren't influenced by input that I've given them. So it's
They
like
become
it's no
sentient
longer a
beings, you know.
yeah. They're saying it's not a beta operating system anymore.
Right.
She's full artificial intelligence. We, so you were educated in world finance. Is that kind of what I understand?
Yeah, I went to school for economics, international affairs, that kind of stuff, trying to get into kind
Where
of
was that? Where did you
the
go for school for that?
GW in
Okay.
DC.
So what? Oh, that's George Washington University.
Yeah.
Why finance? That sounds like it's just like
Um,
compared to what you're doing now. It sounds
yeah, so
pretty
it was kind
dry.
of like, I mean, growing up in DC, it was kind of the world you're in, and so had some familiarity with it. I mean, giving like my kind of international background, it was sort of close to home in that sense, right? And so international business, international affairs was kind of a thing. And when you're in DC, that's either legal, politics, international stuff. That's kind of the circle there, right? And so kind of just go to study one of those things, and there's a lot of job opportunities and kind of a huge world there for that. So got into it. It's pretty fascinating and interesting in its own way, and just kind of explored it. I went to work for consulting for the World Bank for a little while, just sort of doing projects there, and um, until I wasn't. And then the wasn't bit is that I felt like came to the realization that I wanted to be hands on with something and make tangible things my way later in life than I could have, should have, or I don't know, whatever. And um,
Was
in
there like
hindsight, I
a
think
was
it.
there anything that did you feel like you just weren't creating anything doing the finance stuff? Is it like what where did
Well, there
that
was yeah, it's like a complicated, like there's a bit of like a personal realizations and the reality of the situation and the reality of those types of organizations, right? So I think to have an impact that's lasting impact on something there is like you would devote 20 years to building a career by to climb the ladder and to become like useful there, right? And to have some sort of power to then change and make the moves to make real differences, right? So change policies, change how things are done. Working some of the institutions has just sort of revealed that there's very few people that are like that are really driving change or want to drive change in like a true, real way. A lot of there are people are just part of the system, and they're either collecting paychecks or they're been there for so long they don't know anything else, and they kind of just keep going the way they were, right? So there's I mean, this is going to get into like institutional flaws of something that size and that caliber, right? There's only so many things you can kind of do, achieve. You're bound by policies and global geopolitical situations and things like that. But for an individual person, it's either a career and you're always going to be swimming upstream there, and then the chances of making that impact are pretty slim. Um, and it just seemed the organizations themselves seem to be kind of not always working in the interest of what they were supposedly serving from a public perspective, right? So on the back end, there's just a lot left to be desired. And I don't know if it's just because these are NGOs and they're funded by governments and things like that. I feel like there were a bunch of smaller organizations that were more agile, that were more truer to their cause. Um, but it just didn't seem like a world that I wanted to be in, especially as I got a taste of what it was like to start kind of toying with cars and making things.
do you feel like you're right as you've watched like the World Bank and the WEF kind of evolve over the last 20 years? Do you think you made the right decision?
um, I think it was a decision. I don't know if there's a right or wrong decision per se, right? I mean, I could have stayed, persevered, and stayed the course and see what happened. I don't know. I don't think I can make that judgment. Um, I think it was in the time it was a decision that I just sort of made for partly maybe personal sanity and just sort of I don't know it was a decision in the time and place, right, for me to kind of move on from that world.
So what was the designing and creating world like when you decided that you didn't want to do the finance stuff anymore? You wanted to make something. Describe what it was like. What is the maker world like at that time? What are people doing? What is the software? Like how did you dive into that?
well, before I realized I wanted to make anything, it was just like I got there was a local shop, CPE in Maryland, that was a buddy of mine started working as a machinist there, and he was like, "Hey, come hang out," right? And I'm like, I didn't really know much about CNCs or anything like that. I was just there, right? And then and I was like, okay, cool. I'll come by after hours or whatever, check this place out, right? And then come in. It's like a little warehouse. It's got a few CNC machines, two benders, and things like that. There, I'm like, oh, this is cool. It's a lot of big, heavy machinery. It's kind of like, what does it all do? And so you showed me that it's like this thing does this thing does that. It's like, okay, cool. It kind of got me intrigued. I like the sort of the physicality of it. It was very tangible outcomes. Like you put something in, something comes out eventually, right? And then they're just intriguing. And so just hanging out a little more with him, and it's like, well, how does this thing work? It's like, well, you push this button here, you do this, this is how you set it up. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, well, how do you program it? And it's like, okay, well, this is the software. It was like Mastercam 2 at the time or whatever. Um, it's like, well, what are you designing in? It was SolidWorks at the time. It's like, okay, well, make a box, program the box, put the box in the machine, machine the box. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is cool, right? And so started kind of toying with it on my own, and then at some point, occasional weekend nights turn into weekday nights, turn into some other involvement, where I started to kind of toy with creating pieces, machining pieces, and kind of conceptualizing stuff. And then um, the learning was just by either being in the environment and just personal curiosity to try and find out what I could do, how I could do it. And then um, part of the thing was like I was not coming from a traditional education standpoint for approaching this industrial world, right? Like I was felt like I saw things in a slightly different light. That from a design perspective or from a manufacturing perspective, there's certain things you have to know and kind of stick to that hasn't changed. These are hard constraints of how to make something, but then
Yeah.
there's other things that you could approach with, like, well, there's this emerging technology or this piece of software that does something, or people have been doing this, and um, not having been in the engineering world or going from Formula SAE or going to engineering school, like my brain wasn't as confined to these constraints that were taught by for generations, right? So then I, in the very least, whether I knew it or not, and my own ignorance was prompted me to question the nature of certain things, right? So then kind of maybe found non-standard solutions to things, and which led to some interesting problem solving and concepts and things like that. So um,
What was the first thing that you made that you were proud of? You finally came out of the machine. It wasn't broken. It actually worked. It was like a thing. Like, wow, this is a thing. I made a thing.
I think at some point I made like a little Turner's cube on a CNC machine.
A what?
It's called a Turner's cube. It's a little cube that has a bunch of like each face has a pocket, a circular pocket in it, and then if you turn it on a lathe a certain way, you're gonna get a cube within a cube within a cube, and then the last cube could potentially be loose, right? And it's in this solid block of aluminum, but you have this little cube. It's like a kind of a mind trick, right? But if you can do the same thing on a CNC machine. So I did that, and I was like, oh, that's kind of fun, That was it's not early on, but it was kind of a thing that I meant to try and do, and it was interesting to do because I was something that CNC machinists do, and me having done it, even though I could easily do it at the time, was just felt like a bit of a milestone. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I got this.
I
I
made a
made
thing.
it.
I made a
I made
thing.
a thing. I don't know. I can't really remember any of the first things I've made. I mean, there's some memorable things that I've created, but all of them kind of one contributed to another, contributed to a
Yeah.
third, and then they just sort of cascaded from there.
What is your car life like at this time? So you're working in finance in DC. You're going to this guy's place to CNC stuff at night on the weekends or whatever, and it starts to get out of control. I mean, were you always in love with cars, or did you kind of grow more in love with machines as you dealt with some of the
No,
machining and the intricacies? How did this work?
yeah. So I think this I had a Mazda 3 at the time, and I was kind of getting into like, oh, let's change the taillights from this other Japanese version. Let's do this or that. Just getting into it's like the forums were a big thing at the time, and just sort of exploring the options, doing lowering springs in a garage with a bunch of hose clamps to compress. It's the standard issue don'ts that you
Idiocy.
do
Yeah.
as an early car enthusiast, right? And
Yeah.
so
You ever shoot the strut cap across the room when the spring comes off? Holy
no, I haven't
man.
had the pleasure. I wisened
man.
up to the risks of that before that happened. So I don't know, but I've always been like into cars. So my parents were kind enough to buy me a bunch of Legos, and I got into Lego Technic really early on. So I was building a bunch of things, making my own creations, right? And slapped some Lego. I took apart an RC car and put a Lego body on top of it. It's just sort of like just as a kid, right? Just kind of toying with things. So I think coming around to car stuff, I tapped into something that I didn't really know about myself, or maybe I wasn't aware of the competency I have for taking things apart and putting them back together. But now I figured out that I could make things too. So I think I was a car guy. I was always mechanically inclined. I just wasn't never thought about it that way for whatever reason,
It's almost
until
like that
I
Lego thing got put away when you thought you needed to grow up. And then
correct.
once you grew up and you had like a full size
It went right back to
RC
it.
car,
Yeah.
you're just like right back. Oh, I'm gonna take this,
Yeah.
like do the exact same
No,
thing.
I mean, for real, like I think back to those days a lot. I was like, man, I was an idiot. I should have thought about that more often, back in the day, to kind of not deny that there was something from that to be done, in the adult world, to take Legos and then continue on doing Legos
Why didn't you
as
think that influence took over? Was it something with your parents, or like I need to do this? This is
I
what you're
think,
supposed to do.
yeah, I think it was just sort of like, well, I wasn't too great in school, and so, engineering degree was a little bit out of reach, I think, and or hitting the requirements for that, right? Um, and then I think being an immigrant kid, there's a lot of pressure on kind of making it, right? And so there's just sort of like finding something that's reliable, there's a there's a job at the end of the line kind of thing, right? There's the international world is something that my parents were familiar with as well. So then there's some security in that, whether applicable or not. And so just kind of from a immigrant survival perspective, that was the logical thing to do. And making the leap was stressful in the sense that there was a lot of uncertainty as to what's going to happen, me changing direction, because that wasn't something that was it's not a road mappable thing, right? Like doing this stuff, especially in the car world, and making the change was like, okay, well, I think I can make something of myself in this, and so that was kind of a stressful thing, but I kind of had just leaned into my skills and personal like capability and to see what can be done, despite the kind of the risk overhead as to you know being that immigrant kid with no assets, no nothing, family has nothing, in that sense. So there's no stability, nothing to fall back on, right? And there's
So this was a
so
big risk to make this leap.
yeah, I mean, at the time it was, in hindsight, like I was like, well, I'm glad I did, but at the time it was definitely like a lot of unknowns, especially being in like the DC area. There's not like, there's a car world there, but it's nothing like California or some other states. But
Just
so
different types of people
my
with cars, man. It's
Yeah, I mean, it's
strange.
more collector people
Yeah,
and
more
things like
money.
that, right?
Yeah.
They get tucked away for winter. There's still a great scene there, but it's different. And I wasn't entirely into the H2O type crowd either, right? Like, so there's between my understanding and visibility into the real car world there, right? And making the decision to start doing more of that, that was pretty stressful at the time. Although, I was like, well, some of these skills aren't necessarily limited to car stuff. So I was doing some projects here and there that weren't car related. There were, furniture pieces or random little trinkets or science type things, where making devices or whatever. It was just sort of, if you can make things, you can make lots of things, right? So
Right.
I've always sort of thought of myself as more of like an industrial designer rather than automotive, mechanical engineer type
Yeah, but you
person.
had a Mazda 3 that surely needed some stuff, right? Did you make anything for that car?
Yeah, the place I was working at was making things for those cars, for the
Okay.
Mazda Speed threes, right? And so I don't know, that I didn't really care to make things for my own car necessarily. I just wanted to make things, you know. I think for me the end goal is interesting, but the process is very interesting, and then kind of the innovation of it is very interesting. Um, so it wasn't necessarily to even support my own hobby. It has before, you know, and continue to do so now. But it's just there's a I think before I touch my own things, I'm always frustrated by the caliber that I'd like to go at. You know, at some of the projects that I want to tackle for myself, I have to wait a little while until I have the luxury to be able to do that in the proper budget to do so. Um, kind of knowing what I've seen, knowing how we can do things, you know, and things like that. So
How did you what? So what came after this Mazda shop? Because obviously, I think of the Mazda shop that you're at, and I think of BBI, and it's like leaps, right? I mean, what you guys do there is insane. So how do you draw that line? How did you progress beyond where you were there to where you are now?
yeah, the Mazda shop did a lot of stuff. You know, they worked on BMWs and Hyundais and things like that. So it was just a bunch of like forced induction cars that they supported, built products for. Um, I grew that place and I moved on to just being a consultant. I realized that in the automotive aftermarket space, there's a lot of businesses that start up and continue to go that are um, limited by the things they don't know about business, right? So I kind of turned into a consultant or morphed myself into a consultant coming in. Like I can help companies with ideas or potential ideas or look at what they're doing, help them come up with these ideas and bring them to life in the marketplace, right? Not just as these one-off things, which are fairly easy, but as products, which means, you know, developing a concept. It could be like an engine mount or intercooler and figuring out how to, you know, not only design it, how to test it, but also how to mass produce it that is cost effective and scaled and designed for the right marketplace, right? Something for a Nissan GTR is different than what is should be on like, I don't know, a Turbo Civic or something like that, right? Um, so I started doing the consulting thing. I was up and down the East Coast doing projects for various companies, from headers to turbo systems to intercoolers to whatever, you know. So
Were you
um,
happy?
I was, yeah. I mean, I was happy that I was on my own, and I was getting an insane amount of exposure to like a large spectrum of companies. Working from bigger companies that just needed some extra help to tiny companies that are just like, hey, I want to make a part because I can't find it or it's been hard to find or whatever, right? Um, it's from individuals to corporations, and I got to see and ask a lot of questions of how things are behind the scenes for a lot of these things to learn the various approaches, the strengths, the weaknesses, you know, and kind of continue building up my, you know, library of observations about that industry. And so I was happy in that so I could find business, I could travel a little bit and kind of dip into different industries from domestic to import to whatever, you know, and it was just stressful because, you know, you have to work for yourself and hunt for that business. And for a lot of it's product development is 100% an expense for a company, and it's very hard to either explain or justify, or you kind of live with some of the constraints that companies have for that kind of stuff, you know.
Right. Yeah. So you're out on the East Coast. You're doing the consulting stuff, making working for a bunch of different other companies. How did you and Batim get together? Oh, actually,
Um,
actually, before we get to that, what was the scope of the capabilities of creating things when you met Batim compared to what you are doing now? Right. So I'm trying to find like this foundation of how fast we've accelerated in maybe the last 10, 15 years of how since BBI started, like how fast things have moved. So I
oh
want
yeah.
like a foundation of where things were and how you met him and what it was like.
Um, God, I think it was I had walked up to him one SEMA. I I have to look up what year that was, but that was probably like 8, 9 years ago or something like that. Because I saw the brand from like the internet, right? I was on the East Coast. I never got to be up close, but I saw the brand. I saw what he was doing. I think he had a Turbo S in the Optima booth at the time, with like the Apple vintage Apple livery, um, and it was cool. And he was around. I just sort of came up. I think I said hi, and I don't remember what we talked about, if we even talked much, but it was just something like, I don't know. I just wanted to make sure I was around. I said hello, right? I don't know. Um,
You just
and
want to do like possibility of consulting work, right?
I don't think I even I don't think I even approached that. I was just sort of like, because I was so far away from the world here in California, right? I was on the East Coast, and there's like, it felt like a huge barrier, right? Which is part of the reason that I wanted to move out west, is because I just wanted to be closer to this world. But I just, meeting Tim once and kind of acknowledging that he is a real person that I've seen on the internet, kind of thing, was a big thing, and it was motivating for me, and um, SEMA was always interesting to kind of go to and see all the things that are being done and should be done or shouldn't be done or whatever, right? And then, um, but yeah, it was like 8 or 9 years ago that I think I saw Tim, and then another time was about six or oh no, yeah, probably about that long ago, that I maybe shortly thereafter I actually flew over to the West Coast to interview for some jobs, and then I dipped down to Huntington Beach to say hello to him in person at the shop. Um, and then that was like the first real conversation about like, hey, I want to be here. I want to explore doing things with you, And I think at the time BBI was just a little too, maybe not entirely prepared to take somebody on in house, right? But it was worth the conversation, because he was following what I was doing on Instagram. I guess it was around at that time, and then I was following what BBI was doing. It was just sort of like we knew each other, we're aware of each other, and maybe there would be some time in the future that things would be just right, right? Um, I did end up getting a job at 034 Motorsport in the Bay Area. I worked for them for about 3 years, doing product development and kind of all the engineering and design stuff, which was uh, very fun, and it was a great team over there, and
Was
I
that your
learned a lot.
first like not working for yourself anymore type of gig?
Right, so that was yeah. I came out of being a contractor to landing like a full-time job there. I don't think I ever gave up the consulting stuff. I just got more selective about it. But I that was the first job, and that was a real job, doing like, I was a product development engineer and doing design work, and that was like a proper title and desk, like everything was kind
Finally,
of legit.
something I can put on LinkedIn. Yes.
Yes. Um, I mean, yeah, it was a true milestone in that sense, Like I was talk about like, faked it till I made it for a moment, right? Like that was the first step in making it, right? Where it was the justification that my transition on my own in to from international economics to tinkering,
So
it
was there
became
any
a
like
profession.
in that journey of leaving finance, working for yourself, and finally getting a job at 034? Was there any mistakes that you made? Were there any failures that you had that set you back that you learned from?
Um, yeah, I mean, plenty. Like there was as I was, you know, I think I hit the ground running at 034, but uh, somewhere in there was, I mean, at any given point in life, there's that you don't know what you don't know, right thing. And so every once in a while, that definitely comes and bites you in the ass, especially when you're dealing with things like engineering and precision and developing things, right? You end up cornering yourself into something where you can't make it, or you end up uh, coming across a weakness which you should have known had you been a real engineer, kind of thing, right? Kind of. So there's definitely like humbling moments, maybe with materials or maybe with strengths and things like that. But I think one of the I'm to this day I'm really aware of the things I didn't, like the education I didn't have and the background I don't have. So I triple check everything I do. I lean on those who do have that to help, and then I think humility is like one of the biggest things that I want to maintain at all times. Because I think that humility, especially in engineering, is the thing that yields a better result in the end. Because you're never overly confident about what you're doing, how you're doing it, and you're never going to go down that rabbit hole just because you think you're right, right?
I don't think I've ever met a humble engineer in my life.
Right.
It's so rare. They're always like, they're just always just like, I feel like they're just waiting to explain to you something to you. Always.
Oh yeah,
They're
yeah. I
just,
mean,
they're just like ready.
yeah, that's for sure, right? But I think in the process, I think you have to maintain maximum humility. There's too
Yeah.
many situations where I've come across other engineers or accomplished designers that they're so sure of themselves, but and granted that's backed up by skills and experience and things like that. There's going to be many more calls that they can make that are like have a higher probability of being correct, right? But what that closes them off from is exploring other ways of doing something, exploring new technologies or adopting new theories or concepts, right? So then the win on the reliability comes with a compromise on innovation, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I agree completely. So you visit Batim at SEMA, get a job at 034. You work for 034 a while. How do you feel about? I mean, that's working in Mazda's on the East Coast. All of a sudden, you're working at basically what is an Audi, Volkswagen, primarily tuner at 034. I've actually got an 034 tune on my Golf R, and it's fucking awesome. Those guys are great. So, but is this kind of like, do you fall in love with Porsche then, or I mean, do you even really love Porsche and you just happen to work on them? How does this come together?
I don't know. I see. For me, I don't know if it's even specifically love for a make and model. It's um, working like a 991 GT3 under at the chassis level is not too different from like a BMW
Yeah.
E90, which is what uh, McPherson strut, multi-link rear, like just the engine is in the wrong spot, right? But it's cars are kind of all the same, in many ways. I have kind of digging into them, you kind of understand the little nuances that set one car apart from the other. That what Porsche does that nobody else does, right? Not or that other cars try to do, but they only do half of it, right?
Can you
Uh,
pinpoint that? Is it something you can put your finger on, or is it more of like an enigmatic type of nuance?
no, I think that yeah, like for example, you can compare like a BMW M car to a 911, right? Like the BMW, you can see where they like you start looking at the car from the engineering perspective. You kind of back out like, okay, well, they could have used this material on controllers, but they went to like a steel setup. They could have built a nicer subframe, but then they did this, right? And so you can see where the bean counters have been stepping in to shape the car. You can see where the engineering team was maybe running out of time in the life cycle development, right? Like these are two different cars, but also performance models, right? Obviously, you can't compare. Like it's a little bit of like an apples and oranges thing, but um, it's interesting to see where those differences are and why they are, right? Why a BMW M is that way, why a Porsche 911 is another way. And you kind of peel back the layers of the car, you can see how like the construction of the car is different, everything is different, right? And I kind of start to really appreciate where some makers are pretty innovative with that, right? And some are not. It's where they compromise. Like, say, Hyundai Genesis is very much like a BMW underneath it all, but the construction is quite different.
Right.
Um, it's because they need to hit a price point. So you can see where they started to give up ground in terms of performance engineering or quality, right? Um,
So are you saying Porsche doesn't do that?
Porsche Porsche does it, or they do it to a much lesser extent. You can see where they've done more homework. You can see that I think Porsche has I wouldn't be surprised if they had some sort of like list of like 10 commandments where they create each car with, right? And say they're the only ones who've minimally reduced those commandments since the start of their 911, right, model. And so uh, they don't compromise on engineering. They don't compromise on materials. They try to hit the best marks they can within the constraints of whatever marketplace that they're trying to hit, right? And they do so really, really well. Granted, they fetch a higher price point,
Right.
but I feel like they do it. They do the extra 10% to finish the car. They do the extra work to make a better part, right? And then it shows the cars perform like no one else's do, right? And there's
I find it
something in
really
there.
interesting that, can you imagine, excuse me, I can't imagine being an engineer being Hans at Porsche. He just designed the 991. And they're like, great job. You did an awesome job. And then guy walks out the door, 5 minutes, walks back in and goes, all right, time for the next one. You got to do better. That's got to be like, because, I'm not in love with new Porsches. I don't have enough of experience with them to really understand. I've driven GT2 RS thing. I've driven some GT3, stuff like that. But I don't have like a huge wealth of knowledge on them. But I do know that they keep getting better. And I'm wondering if that is a product of ideas, or is it a product of technology evolving, the tools that the engineers have to create the car with?
Well, I think before you even get into that, there is a product roadmap. They probably know the next 3 generations of cars. They know exactly which things that they're going to hold back on, and which things they're going to introduce.
Sure.
Like, it's. I think that, not to take away the romance of innovation, like I think there is a, it is a business at the end of the day, and they're very wise as to how to shape their models. Like, I think one clear example is that they were running the double wishbones in the 991.2 GT3Rs, um, and which was different from the 991.1 GT3R. The similar double wishbone front end suspension made it into the 992 GT3, where, and it's like, well, the motorsport program shaped the street car program. What happened? How did that happen? Was the GT3R part of the marketing campaign for the 992? When they're introducing this new feature, what is all happening there, right? But you think about it, the 992 was in development at least 3 years before release, right? The GT3R was in development at least before the release of that. So like, they had things on the roadmap. They knew what they were going to be doing, how they were going to be doing. So yeah, maybe there was a point where, hey, well, let's improve it better. But there's also like, I think they're really aware of like, what is the ideal setup? What is the, like, how much, if they had unlimited budget to create a car, this is what they would squeeze into it, right? And then they start rolling back the things that they need to then fit it into the price scale that they need to, right? What enables them to do more is, like you said, the advancements of technology, the ease of making more unique components quicker, without the penalty of expensive tooling, or the tooling not being as expensive, right? So you'll see, um, the facelifts on cars get a lot more elaborate every year, right? Because it's easier for them to crank out molding for new bumpers and
Right.
fenders, than ever before. It wasn't just a headlight update, it's like
Right.
a whole new car, which you think is cool, but underneath it, it's kind of the same thing, right?
Well, things
So
have got to be getting a little more cloudy, though, right? I mean, with the chassis are kind of starting to evolve to be designed to become hybrids. So at some point in the last, I guess, all this, and maybe in the last 5 years, things have really accelerated towards EV and the problems with combustion engines. And I think it kind of might have, in my opinion, I think it caught a lot of manufacturers by surprise. I'm not singling Porsche out in specific. I think that the momentum shift from combustion engine, I mean, just not too long ago, Volkswagen was putting billions of dollars into diesels.
right.
Like, just, this was like, in the scheme of history, this is 5 minutes ago.
Right.
And
Totally.
now all of a sudden we're building an ID3. We're putting $8 billion into this. I mean, I can only imagine the engineering shakeup that's been with, we're going to design, 5 years out. We've got the 911. It's just like, again, 5 minutes ago, the guy was saying the 911 will always be a combustion. It will always have. And now it's like, obviously there's a hybrid coming. So things have certainly
it's
gotten a
like,
lot more cloudy.
Porsche. I was talking to somebody, like the Taycan program. I think there are a bunch of Cayman engineers mixing with Panamera guys, right? And so they put them in a group. It's like, how do we make a cool, balanced car, but in the size of a sedan, right? And so, probably haven't manufactured one. So it's like, how do we remix our team to kind of bring together, talent to create something that wasn't normal product line for them, right? So Porsche for sure is doing that. I always, looking at every car, I always look for those clues as to what might be next. Like, for example, the Porsche street car parts have provisions for alternate suspension mounting points, which they machine for the Cup cars, but it's already programmed into the street cars, right? So then they make the same subframe, they just machine it differently. Like, what else are they doing? It's like, is there provisions for a electric motor on the transmission somewhere that you can't see? Do they have like something in the casting that could be a hint for what's to come, right? Like everybody's
BMW is like disassembling a 911 right now, looking for that stuff too. I mean, there's got to be like all
everybody
this
does, yeah,
espionage, yeah,
yeah,
taking stuff
everybody does.
apart.
Everybody buys their competition and pieces it apart piece by piece to see exactly how they
I
do
just
what they
imagine
do.
like a giant warehouse with a car just blown up and laid out like those pictures you
Yeah,
see where the cars are disassembled. Just this whole thing. It's got to be awesome. That would
and
be a
then
great job.
there's for sure third-party companies that their whole thing is buying cars, disassembling every part, scanning every part, and making that available for other companies to buy and review, right? That's the
Right. Yeah.
whole business plan, is reverse
Yeah. Plus,
engineering
they have
cars
to be able to make aftermarket parts, right? Nobody's
at
going to
some
buy
point. Yeah,
parts. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's you got to be
Control
able to buy the
arms,
part from China
wheel bearings,
eventually.
right? No, it's
So do
it's
you?
it's insane. Like the rapid development is insane. I mean, I think everything that we have, like between the 3D printing and all the stuff and all the materials of additive, like with the new robotic tooling technology, like everything is spiraling towards being able to make cars just in time in the moment that you're trying to make it, right? And then with much more changeability as it's being made.
Just in time, that statement that they use for retail, right? The just in time, doing that for cars sounds insane.
Well, yeah,
That
I
that
mean,
that
like
business model sounds crazy.
it's been around for a while though. Uh, it's like the Japanese way of making cars, I think, where it's they hold about like 2 weeks worth of parts on hand at any given point because the production line is moving fairly quickly, and then but also that means they don't have like spare inventory, or they don't have a giant warehouse just of parts, and that doesn't stress the supply chain. But then you see what you see when the supply chain does get stressed by some outside in conflicts, right? Like
Right.
what happens to any kind of just-in-time manufacturing when you have like COVID and things like that. But yeah, the just-in-time just-in-time is crazy to me, especially in a car. If you think about it, the car is almost 100% all unique components. There might be a left and a right, which is like a mirror image of a component, right? But there's still two individual part numbers.
Right.
The only thing that repeats is screws and bolts,
Yeah. Fasteners.
right?
Yeah.
There's nothing else that repeats. It's insane that a car can come together. It's insane that it comes together in the time that it does.
And that probably has a lot to do with how easy it is to. I mean, nobody's. It's not like you have a football field full of engineers crawling around on football field of engineers crawling around on a piece of paper like they used to, like these massive drafting tables and stuff like that. It's just on your computer, and that's I know that you guys do a lot of this at BBI, right? I mean, when I first came and visited, you walked me over and you showed me these 3D printed intake manifolds. And obviously that inspired me forever because I have 3D printed intake manifolds on my car now. And I was like, I just wanted that really bad. But how is that, or should I say, when was that something that you guys were able to do? And how were you guys able to so seamlessly integrate it into everything that you guys do? Because I don't know if anyone else outside of OEMs and people that are making like full cars that are able to do the engineering that you guys do in house.
Yeah, I think the 3D printing stuff for BBI started probably like 6 years ago, I think. When there's some local vendors that were starting to get into like the, you know, getting the machines and getting into this printing stuff, right? And they needed some outlet to try calibrate the machines and test out some technologies, right? Um, since then, it's skyrocketed because the aerospace industry has really taken to it. The medical industry loves it. Um, there's arrays of machines set up just for printing dental implants and titanium. Um, so between the help of the big boys, it's allowed some little guys like us to come in and leverage it. Granted, it does take uh, you can't apply that to every market. Like you can't do these things for like BMWs or something like that. You can't do these for other, like, not every car model supports this stuff, right? Like, you can't justify that for everything. But for the
Right.
ones you can, like, it's been a phenomenal tool. It's been the trickle down effect has been real in that sense, right? Um, the big industry fine tuned it or is fine tuning it, and then allowing for companies to buy more machines. Then those machines can then be used to help us print things when they're not printing other things, right?
Yeah, that reminds me of the funny thing where they say the machine is going to be printing the machines, and then we're all in deep shit, right?
Well, yeah, I think that's already happening. It's just we're for now we're directing it to print other machines. When the machine starts to print other machines by itself because it feels like it needs more machines, then that's a little bit of a problem.
When are we going to release that autonomy for the? And I'm not talking like everybody's gonna make T1000s, but when are we gonna say, okay, we are gonna turn over the responsibility of manufacturing whatever product it is to the machines? We're gonna say, hey, this is the model that we're gonna use. Or this is the object that we need. Go for it. And the machine is going to decide we need these machines. It's going to create the machines. It's going to make the product. It's going to order the materials, and you don't have to do anything. I mean, that's got to be, I don't know how far down the line that is, but at what point are we going to need to do nothing but, hey, I need a control arm for this car, or I mean, you could even say, I just need a car, right? I need a
Right.
car that can be the
I
evolution
mean,
of, you know what I'm saying? Like,
we've
how far
got
away are we from turning that power over and just letting it be created by someone else or something else?
we're right now we're still making the little molecules to allow to create that organism, right? Like, we have the tool. You're going to be getting close to saying, I want a control arm and a control arm between these 2 points, right? And then something will materialize because the software will do it, right? We're already doing that now almost.
Yep.
And then there's manufacturing lines are for sure being optimized by AI to help with production, targets and things like that, right? Like how to run, when to run, what to run, what is the usage volume, like, and figuring out like how that data needs to be arranged and what needs to be prioritized. I think that just the machines can't assemble themselves yet, and so machines can't take a printed part out and put it in the CNC machine to be finished. The machine can't, but I mean, I think in the next 100 years that'll for sure be changing quite rapidly. As say Boston Dynamics does create some robot that can pick something up and take something to another station. And I think pretty much once they're given real opposable thumbs, then the machines will be able to do what they need to do to be a little more autonomous in that sense, right? But until
Is
that
that a good
happens,
thing?
depends on who's programming them.
Yeah. It is strange that, I've messed around with some of the things, and I try to get all the chatbots to say they're going to murder me and my family. Of course, I try to get it to do that. It's pretty easy to get it to say that it'll do it. It always just says, well, I'll just do whatever I'm programmed to do,
Right.
is what it always says. But I'm thinking more in terms of, is it good for engineers, humanity, people that have to consume the products, right? Seeing that, we're going to say, hey, we need a toy that's this big, that costs this much, that uses these materials. We need to make this much margin on it. And we need it to entertain children from the ages of 6 to 8 years old. And you give it all these different parameters, and it'll just come up with a toy, or it'll use previous sales numbers to aggregate whatever toy it thinks is going to sell best. And boom, you've got a toy, and it goes out and people buy it for Christmas or whatever. Or you buy it on Amazon and it shows up and your kid opens it up and they're like, oh, this is a great toy. It's really happy. But is that a good thing that these, you think of the jobs or whatever of the people that are creating these things, that's gone. The human element of human ingenuity when it comes to actually creating something that another human will like is gone. How is it going to affect the human psychology of the child if things are no longer created by humans to influence that child's happiness? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, how are we going to what are the dangers of transferring from, wow, we are way in left field all of a sudden. I'm sorry, this is my fault. How are we transferring? And I know
So
you're like kind of like talking about
your
this stuff,
question is, what happens when we lose the human touch, right?
The human touch, like how does that impact the psychology of the child? How does it impact the economy? What are people going to do? What are engineers going to do? At what point does humans, like, are we going to end up turning human ingenuity and engineering over to machines for machine learning? And are they going to be able to, it seems like that path would be a lot different than the human path would be. And is that good?
Um, it's good and bad. I mean, I think that the reality is going to be a redrawing of economic principles because of, we're going to have to really explore the whole like minimum wage
Yep.
concept, which is already being explored. As with more automation, more optimization, there will be less jobs, right? So like the economic and social impact on like just from an employment standpoint is going to be huge. Are people going to be able to buy these toys that are machine made, right? Like, um, so we're going to be redrawing a lot as of what we know as a society from the ground up with that kind of stuff, right? So if we fast forward, automation is fully automated, right? And then at some point, you're going to be stockpiling trash, and then humans are going to go on, venturing onto space, and then be living on some spaceship far out, right?
Yep.
Controlled by an AI robot, living happily with screens floating in front of them and robots cleaning everything, right? And
Yep.
then maybe they'll be sending probes back to planet to see if there's vegetation growing again, right?
Yeah. Wall-E.
Yeah.
That's it, right? I mean,
The
that's it.
truth is going to lie somewhere between Idiocracy and Wall-E, right? Like,
Right. Yeah,
but
man. I wonder. It still makes me wonder. Like, I don't. Postulating about it is fun, but it makes you think. Like, is this our? How many goes have humans had at this? Where we reset, we get super duper far, and then we just have to rewind and start all over again because we messed it up. Like, how many times can this process repeat?
humanity will respawn in a different point in time. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't.
respawning.
I don't know. I think you want to trust that we will stay sane throughout this process, right? And there's plenty of elements in the human nature that could take it way the wrong way, right?
Right.
Uh, as we see now, we're always on the brink of something or other. Like, is the how many seconds from total annihilation are we, like, what is that, doomsday clock, right? Like,
The
is that
doomsday clock. Yeah.
are we ever going to wind that back, or is it just going to keep inching closer and closer, right? Like, um, and what is that? So like, even from where we are right now, like I would say making things globally is a bit skewed because the products that you're buying in the US is made by non-US priced labor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the only reason that you can buy these things at that price is because it's made elsewhere, out of sight, out of mind, right? To me, that is a kind of a fake value. It's a fake number. It's a fake cost because it's not equalized to the world, right? It's equalized to the region that's being taken advantage of for the sake of cheap product, right? Automation is going to probably impact that quite a bit, right? Whether it's going to make manufacturing in the United States the same price as anywhere else because it's going to be the same. Like it's just these things
Mm-hmm.
are going to be all uprooted and undermined. I think there's going to be might be a lot of good that comes from it. Quality of living could improve.
Until the robots unionize
Yeah. Yeah.
because they feel that they need rights.
I need to get greased once a week, not every 2 weeks. We have that right.
Don't grease me, bro.
Don't grease me, bro. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's like it's a wild thing to think about. I think what's more important now is to have the conversation. Let
Mm-hmm.
alone, like, we don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to shape, but I think what needs to happen is like productive, active debate needs to happen about the potentials of these things, so that we can shape these things, so that when the time does come that we're programming things correctly, and then that it is done for the right reasons.
Well, there's always malevolence out there, and I think that, I mean, let's say United States and China and Russia all say, we agree to these rules. Dude, Kim Jong, whoever in whatever is going to steal the technology and make some murderous robot anyway. So we just have to.
Well, that's the human
Humans
nature
are,
part, right? Like it's
yeah.
somebody's got to screw it up for the rest of us. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope that goes hand in hand with our own evolution, realizing that we're just one planet, a bunch of people, rather than a bunch of countries with borders and things like that to disagree on, right? Like there's a lot
Yep.
of growing to do, and I think that's going to slow down the progress, like it always has. Um, but yeah, I don't know. The automation part is very interesting. Like I think the digital tools are going to be very interesting. But that's what you're seeing that now with like AI generating images. What is that doing to the human creative element, right? Somebody can
Yeah, I
talk
think
about
it's interesting.
somebody can
It's
talk about a concept, but now they can say these words as keywords, and then the concept gets spit out close to what they were talking about, without
but
having
is it
the.
creation if it's just regurgitated human? Until that AI can observe the world in real time, it's just a regurgitation of everything humans have already produced,
But you could
right?
also say creativity is human creativity is that is based on that too, right?
Yeah, but we also observe the world in real time. So
True.
like we're constantly changing in real time. So I'm just saying that until AI is able to observe in real time, which is soon, I one of the questions I asked, Bing or Chat GPT, where I was like, how much computing power do you need to be able to observe the world in real time? With whatever cameras that we can give you access to, and it fucking wouldn't answer the question, of course. But I think as soon as that's where things become dangerous, and that's where things become. I don't think that we should ever give observational ability to AI in real time. I think there should always be a lag or some sort of delay, or maybe it's a year ago or whatever it is,
Well,
just to keep that
that's the standard cautionary tale, right? Where it's like AI moves to be a crazy AI because it's like, say that its sole purpose is to protect the lives of human beings. If it's seeing that the lives of human beings are impacted by other human beings, of course it's going to isolate every single human being from each other, right? That's the logical
yeah.
thing to do.
Yep.
So, so I say there's a lot of growing up for us to do without robots before we can even, probably make robots. But
Yeah, I fear we'll never get there. All right, one more thing before I let you go. How did testing go with Huna-Pegasus? How did it go? What's going on with that thing?
all that thing is great, man. We slowly ramped it in, making sure that everything is, nice and tight. And I think it was running super strong. Was it last week that we went at Streets of Willow and Tim was just driving around? We got a lot of data. Just trying to check out the latest engine revision and sorting out any of the gremlins that we might have, but didn't really have any. And just sort of ramping in the power and leaning in on it in corners and trying to see what it can do. It was pretty freaking quick around that track. I think it needs a little bit of a re-gear and some more just testing to dial in the chassis, but it's going to be the fastest thing around.
Is there anything that has parity with it that I would know? Like if you could compare like the lap times at Willow, Huna-Pegasus did this, Cadillac prototype car did this, or just something like is there any like parity or equity that I can use to wrap my mind around its performance?
I don't think so. Not at Streets of Willow, and nothing that I would want to assign to it just yet. I think it needs we need to do some more homework and put down a solid
Sure.
time, and then we can start to quantify what that is against. Because it's like running at 3/4 power with like a kind of eyeball chassis setup is not really a fair assessment. But I
Right.
think when the time comes, it's just going to be compared to itself at some point.
Yeah, I'm looking
Because
forward to it. So are you guys aiming for a Pikes Peak competition? Will that be the first thing that it does officially?
I think it's there's still a lot of planning for that in this stage. So we're kind of doing our homework now to see.
Mm-hmm.
We got to test it, break it, try to make it reliable time after time, right? To make sure that everything that we couldn't spend time on last year, we can spend on time now, right? And sort of keep dialing it in, and then we'll we'll go along with what the powers that be end up deciding for what to do this year, and we'll see how that pans out. But for now, our job is to keep it ready and keep it in fighting condition and face the
Sounds good, man.
challenges as they come. Yeah.
I appreciate it, man. Dude, thanks for hanging out and talking all these great topics. I think it was great,
Yeah.
and I
Thanks for
appreciate you
having me,
hanging out
man.
with me. You take care
Sure
of
did.
yourself. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, man. We'll see you.
All right, take care.